I continue my my comments on the video um, by Mr. Deval Patrick, and I am trying to find reason in the manifestation of the world. And first, I will ask myself, why am I speaking English? And if someone asked me this question, I could broadly give an answer that English is an Indo-European language, and that, as far as I know, the Indo-Europeans were a people of the Caucasus region in today's Russia or Ukraine, who were tall and aristocratic, warrior-like people who spread all over Europe and the Middle East and Asia Minor and India and Persia, and they brought with them their culture, their language, and I think that 99% of Europeans speak an Indo-European language. The only exceptions are Finnish, Basque, and Hungarian, but all other Europeans, white, speak an Indo-European language, and many non-whites speak an Indo-European language. So as far as I know, English is made of two-thirds of Greek, Latin, or Roman, and French words, and the remaining is Germanic words. And if I had to explain why I am expressing myself in English, I would have to reconstruct the whole biological evolution of mankind, which has brought about the Indo-European peoples, the ancient Greeks, who were, according to Galton, the most intelligent people ever, because the average IQ must have been, the average must have been in 20 points higher than modern English of the end of the 19th century. So their average was probably the highest ever recorded in history. I don't know if it's true, but if you consider the number of Athenians and ancient Greeks and the proportion of men of genius that they produced, they must have had, out of mathematical necessity, a very high IQ. So they produced a brilliant culture, and then they fell into decadence, probably by a dialectical process of wealth and prosperity bringing about decadence and weakness and degeneracy. But yeah, and the Romans conquered them, and then the Romans conquered Britain and settled there, and then the Germanic barbarian tribes conquered Britain, the Angles, the Saxons, the Jutes, the Norsemen or the Nordmen, the men of the North from the Vikings, which had settled in France, and then with William the Conqueror, and then the English became some sort of Germanic mixed race of pure Germanic stock, but a mixture of various Germanic tribes, and they were genetically and still are genetically very qualitative, one might say. They are beautiful, they are intelligent, they are hardworking, they have many qualities, but they also had religious conflicts. I'm not very familiar with the history of England, but the religious conflicts and violence forced them to flee away from the persecution, and they sought with the progress of technology and sea how do you call it, sea travel, they settled in America, and they wanted to forge a new Jerusalem and a new religious and political utopia. And because of their libertarian views and the birth of capitalism, they conquered the wilderness, and they slaughtered many people in the process, and they became the world's first power in a matter of 150 years, one might say. That was the highest growth of culture and civilization and creativity. That's Michael Hart, the Jewish American author, which says that 19th century America was probably the most creative century in the history of technology and inventions and discoveries and stuff like that. So, and then America became a world superpower because of its population and its economic system and its values, and they conquered an old and decadent Europe, culturally, politically, economically, and that's why we are taught English in our schools, because America has become dominant. And yeah, broadly, that's the reason why I'm speaking English. Not very well, and then the question would be, why is my English so poor? Because I left school when I was 17 years old, and I learned speaking English or American by watching Hollywood movies and listening to songs by Eminem mostly, and my brain is limited, and I haven't had a formal training in English, so it's kind of, yeah. So there are many reasons. There are the whole world history, biological history, cultural history makes me speak English. That's all I wanted to say as an introduction. And this man, Mr. Deval Patrick, says that patriotism is tricky for black, and one might say that Hegelianism is tricky for the negative, because it's tricky to love a philosophy which doesn't always love you back. It's very difficult to love Hegel, because Hegel will not always love you back, and that's the negative moment. And then he says, he was once asked a question by a white person, why on earth would you want to be black? And he hadn't considered the alternative, and never would. And one might say, why on earth would you want to be God? But God is all there is. God is being. God cannot cease to be God. He can only forget that he is God. God cannot cease to be what it is. It can only lose his consciousness of himself. So why on earth would God want to be God? The answer could be, well, he hasn't considered the alternative, and never will, because there's no other choice. Yeah. This man is proud to be a patriot. And he says that America is not organized according to geography, a common culture, language, or even race, but by civic ideals, equality, opportunity, and fair play. It's partly true, but to negate the cultural and linguistic and racial aspect of America is quite contradictory and quite I am not totally in agreement, because you cannot understand America without understanding the libertarian ethos, the Christian religion, the white Anglo-Saxon stock, and then the black history and the influence of the Jews, and then Hispanics, all of that. But it's true that America is a country of objective spirit made manifest to himself the most, because the Americans have the consciousness of their being in the Constitution. They are a very Hegelian people in this sense. And he says, we are a country with a conscious, a nation of values, but the individual consciousness which recognize its own essence as being in made manifest in what Hegel calls objective spirit, which is the mind of man becoming autonomous and set in a legislative state of laws and constitutional rights and political organization. This is a moment in the process of development of spirit. And I said in another video that the greatest American ever was Thomas Sowell, because he was a black who had incorporated within his mindset the love for white political identity, namely libertarianism. But precisely because it was libertarianism, it was beyond black and white, and the greatest homage, the greatest tribute that a black man could make to white America is to say, your ideology is so great that even I can incorporate it into my own individual consciousness. And that's a very Hegelian a very Hegelian gesture to make, and that's why, as an American, Sowell is symbolically a great American. There are other men of American nationality who are greater because of a higher consciousness, namely Philip K. Dick, Neil Walsh, William Pierce, because they attained a divine consciousness, but they were no longer American. As I said, they were only accidentally American. But the essence of America is a black man with all the suffering that he has endured, who appropriate the ideology of symbolically the race which has oppressed him, and says your ideology is beyond race. It's that's why it's universal. That's why it's true. It's because it goes beyond the particulars. And yeah, so, and the same goes for this man, Deval Patrick, a black patriot, is the proof that American patriotism can be universal and transcend the boundaries of the particularities, and that must be very difficult for a black to love the American Constitution, considering all the history and the past tragedies which have occurred. But that's a very Hegelian movement. So yeah, and he says that Americans cannot be great without being good. So the idea that moral virtue and ethics, that probably what Hegel calls morality and Sittlichkeit, the good intention and the effectuation, the actualization of goodness in a sense of civic virtue are one, and that's a profound remark. And he says that America embodies the living values of equality, opportunity, and fair play, even when it's inconvenient, which forces to be humble and to accept a part of humility. And I myself, as an arrogant empirical individual, I must learn to be humiliated, namely to be brought down to earth in the most ruthless manner. I must be humiliated by my own creation as a transcendental principle, because I must learn to live the same circumstances that all humans go through in this creation that I envision as being God's being. And I must teach myself humility, and I am, as an individual, I am very arrogant, and I have not yet succeeded in overcoming my pride. And yeah, and I will conclude by saying that the voice of the people is the voice of God, because the people is made in the image of God, and the fate of God is to love the voices coming from everywhere, and to accept the voice of mankind as being a manifestation of his higher will, and to be in accordance, in agreement with the universal will. And that's also a very Hegelian movement. So the motto Vox populi, Vox Dei is very profound, because the people was made in the image of God, and God must recognize himself in his own manifestation, and learn, which is the most difficult thing, learn to love his own higher will by negating his lower will. And the purpose of blacks in America, but anywhere, is to teach to reason, to be humble. And yeah.